So we're all familiar with the number 0. And we're also familiar with the number 1. Now, you can go from the number 0 to the number 1. Now, what about negative 1? You may have heard of it, but do you know how it works? You can also go from 0 to negative 1. You can also go from negative 1 to positive 1. We'll get into an example now. If we were to look at this number line, you can see that a point of origin or a stationary, kind of look at it as a middle ground number here, would be 0. Everything on the right hand side of 0 is a positive number, and everything on the left hand side of 0 is a negative number. There's a high chance that you have heard of negative numbers in your everyday life, regardless if you've learned algebra before. They can come in the forms of possibly debt with a bank. For example, if you try to spend $20 and your bank account balance was currently $0, you would end up with getting minus the $20 off that 0, which would leave you with negative $20 in your bank account. Or in plain English terms, you would owe the bank $20. You would be $20 in debt. And that's exactly how negative numbers work. Now, negative numbers and positive numbers are all real numbers. Now, Algebra 1 doesn't entirely dip into mathematics involving non-real numbers or imaginary units, but I just wanted to throw that in there to let you know that negative numbers and positive numbers aren't different types of numbers completely. They are all real numbers. They just hold different values. So the negative sign before a number just allows you to notice and see that this number is less than 0, or it has no real value of substance. It has a less than nothing value. For example, say somebody had 2 apples, for instance, and say another person had negative 2 apples, for instance. Now, if you're somebody that had 2 apples, you have 2 physical apples. If you had somebody with negative 2 apples, not only does he not have any physical apples at all, but he's at a loss of 2 apples. For instance, this can be looked at in the way of debt as well, because that's something every human experiences in everyday life, front and center and single-handedly. For example, if somebody came along and wanted to give this person 2 apples, the person that has negative 2 apples, he would now have 0 apples. So, although he was physically given 2 apples, he didn't have no apples. He was at a loss or a debt of 2 apples. So him getting given 2 apples has brought him to having 0 apples. So this person now still doesn't have any physical apples, but he doesn't owe anyone any apples. He is free of debt. You can look at it at the example over here as well. If we were to pay our $20 debt, we wouldn't have $20, but we would just have $0 again. So we still wouldn't have any money, but we wouldn't owe any money anymore. Quite a simple and quick topic. Chances are you may have been exposed to this in real world examples and real world scenarios, regardless of if you have taken any sort of algebra class before in your lifetime. For example, if you work in retail, you probably have to do numbers a lot. Some of them might be negative. Someone owes you some money for an item. I don't know, maybe like a buy now, pay later, or something like that. That would be an example of that person would be in a negative until they paid back. It was until they paid the later part. So they took the item now, but they didn't pay in full right now for that. They come in examples of buying a car on finance. You own the car technically. It would look that way. It's in your garage. You drive it. You have the keys, but you're paying a weekly balance towards a debt, which is the price of the entire car. And that's how financing works. So that's also a negative number. It extends onto a lot of things, even house mortgages and things of that nature. If any real world scenario you purchase an item that you didn't have the upfront amount of cash value to purchase, you have gone into negative numbers. You're in debt, which is a negative number. Your debt is negative however much that item cost. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode and the first episode of the Algebra 1 series, where we covered negative and positive numbers.